The Titan's arena hung in the void like a mechanical tumor with delusions of grandeur, carved from an asteroid that had apparently volunteered for the galaxy's most ambitious urban planning disaster. What had once been a respectable chunk of space rock now bristled with combat platforms, spectator galleries, and enough weaponry to sterilize small moons, all in service of the galaxy's most cherished tradition, watching sentient beings attempt to murder each other for entertainment and political advancement. For 6 centuries, the arena had served as the ultimate proving ground for the galaxy's warrior elite, operating under a philosophy so elegantly brutal it made natural selection look like a gentle suggestion. Physical dominance meant political power. Combat superiority determined diplomatic standing. If your species couldn't produce fighters capable of liquefying opponents in creative ways, you were cordially invited to shut up and let the grown-ups handle galactic governance. The system worked magnificently, assuming your definition of magnificently included regular shipments of body parts and a casualty rate that made most extinction events look like minor accidents. The Thektar sent their razor-limbed death dancers. The Morvani contributed their crystalline juggernauts. Even the gaseous Vorthak managed to manifest combat forms, though nobody quite understood how beings made of weaponized fog could throw punches that registered on seismic equipment. What unified all these species was a simple, time-tested principle. Evolution had gifted them with natural weapons, armor, or abilities specifically designed for efficient violence. Claws that could shred starship hulls. Exoskeletons that deflected plasma fire. Toxic secretions that could dissolve most known materials. They were living weapons forged by millions of years of survival-oriented natural selection, which made the recent decision to grant humanity probationary membership something of a cosmic joke that nobody was sure was actually funny. The Galactic Combat Commission had voted 1,247 to 3 to extend arena privileges to Earth's dominant species after reviewing their physiological assessments, documents that read like a cautionary tale about evolutionary comedy. Bipedal mammals with skin so thin it couldn't stop a determined insect. Bones that fractured if you looked at them crossways. Muscles apparently designed by committee and built from substandard materials. No claws, no fangs, no armor, no toxic glands, no redundant organs, and reflexes that registered as pathetically inadequate by galactic standards. The arena's governing board had approved humanity's application with the kind of patronizing benevolence typically reserved for charity cases. After all, even apex predators needed comic relief between the serious bloodshed. Warlord Thane Grimjaw had been questioning that decision for exactly 26 days, 14 hours, and 47 minutes, though he preferred to express his doubts through creative threats rather than precise timekeeping. Standing 11 feet tall in his ceremonial combat harness and built like a siege engine that had been crossbred with a particularly aggressive mountain range, Thane belonged to the Superiority warrior caste, a species whose evolutionary path had taken a hard left turn at intimidating and kept going until it achieved existential nightmare. His exoskeleton was the color of dried blood and roughly twice as hard as most tank armor. His forearms terminated in bone spears that could punch through reinforced steel. His jaw could crack titanium alloy, which he occasionally demonstrated on disappointed opponents. He was also the arena's most feared combat instructor, a position he'd earned through a combination of tactical brilliance, uncompromising standards, and a teaching philosophy best summarized as learn fast or become lunch, literally, because I get hungry after training sessions. In his 37 years at the facility, he had personally trained over 2,000 gladiators across 43 species. His methods were brutal, his standards impossibly high, and his success rate legendary. He had also eaten 17 students who failed to meet his expectations, though he insisted this was purely educational rather than recreational, which made humanity's latest offering particularly insulting. Colonel Jade Nightbringer stood 5 feet 8 inches in her combat boots, weighed perhaps 160 pounds with full gear, and looked like she'd have trouble opening a particularly stubborn container of preserved foods. Her species had evolved on a world so pathetically peaceful that their apex predators were apparently something called large dogs, creatures so non-threatening that most galactic species kept them as entertainment. She had no natural weapons, no armor plating, no toxic capabilities, and muscle density that wouldn't qualify as functional by Superiority standards. She was, in Thane's professional opinion, a walking advertisement for the futility of pacifist evolution. Listen well, meatbags. Thane's voice could shatter reinforced ceramics at considerable range. The assembled gladiator candidates snapped to attention with the precision of beings who understood that inattention could result in sudden, violent digestion. Except for Nightbringer, who moved with the casual confidence of someone apparently unaware that she was standing next to a literal apex predator. "Today begins combat preparation for arena qualification," he announced, his voice carrying enough menace to make veteran warriors update their wills. "Some of you will prove worthy. Some of you will learn valuable lessons about inadequacy. And some of you," his four eyes focused on Jade with the intensity of targeting computers, "will discover that evolution occasionally produces mistakes." Nervous laughter rippled through the ranks. The Thektar candidates clicked their blade fingers in anticipation. The Morvani crystalline beings resonated harmoniously. Jade Nightbringer simply nodded as if he'd mentioned the atmospheric pressure. The first trial involved what the instructors cheerfully called survival dancing, a combat exercise designed to test reflexes, durability, and creative problem-solving against opponents equipped with weapons that could vaporize most organic matter. The alien candidates attacked the challenge with enthusiastic brutality, their evolutionary gifts on magnificent display. Natural armor that could deflect military-grade weaponry. Reaction times measured in microseconds. Bone density that registered as minor geological formation on most scanners. Jade approached the exercise differently. She studied attack patterns, calculated optimal positioning, analyzed weapon trajectories, and identified tactical opportunities the other candidates missed entirely. She didn't rely on superior reflexes or armor. She made herself impossible to hit through applied physics and movement prediction. She finished in the top 3. Not through genetic advantages, but through systematic tactical analysis. Thane's expression could have frozen a supernova into submission. "Clever little meat sack," he growled, his voice resonating through the arena's acoustic systems, like grinding metal having philosophical disagreements. "Thinks she can outthink a warrior's trial. Tell me, Nightbringer, what happens when your opponent doesn't give you time for mathematical calculations?" "Then adaptation becomes more critical than preparation, sir," Jade replied with military precision that somehow managed to sound respectful while completely missing the point of intimidation. The warlord's laugh was like a plasma cutter arguing with a fusion reactor. "Adaptation? Your species adapted by hiding in caves while actual predators claimed the surface territories. We adapted by becoming the apex killers of ecosystems that would sterilize most life forms through casual environmental exposure." He gestured to the assembled candidates, living weapons forged by evolution's most demanding examinations. "Observe your surroundings, human. See strength. See speed. See the genetic inheritance of survival earned through millions of years of successful violence. Now examine your own pathetic anatomy and explain what advantages your defective biology provides." Jade's response was measured, analytical. "Flexibility, sir. Problem-solving adaptability. Tactical integration capabilities. The capacity for weakness." Thane's roar overloaded several audio monitoring systems and caused 3 spectators in the observation galleries to require medical attention for damaged hearing. Elaborate vocabulary disguising fundamental inadequacy. "Your species survived through irrelevance, too insignificant for legitimate predators to waste energy hunting. Your evolutionary debris, Nightbringer. Cosmic refuse that somehow stumbled into sentience." The training arena fell silent except for the background hum of life support systems struggling to process the atmospheric disturbance caused by his voice. This had transcended instruction. It was systematic humiliation delivered with surgical precision and enough volume to register on seismic equipment. But Jade didn't break, didn't flinch. She absorbed the verbal assault with the same clinical detachment she'd shown the combat exercise. "Understood, sir," she said simply. Thane's eyes narrowed to laser-focusing intensity. In his considerable experience, gladiator candidates either crumbled under psychological pressure or responded with righteous fury that could be channeled into combat effectiveness. This calm acceptance was unprecedented and frankly annoying. The following weeks established a predictable pattern that became the arena's primary entertainment during slow periods. Thane would design exercises emphasizing alien advantages, raw power competitions, speed trials, endurance tests calibrated for non-human physiology and pain tolerance. Jade would struggle initially, analyze systematically, and develop unconventional solutions that technically satisfied mission parameters while completely bypassing the exercise's intended educational objectives. And Thane would respond with increasingly creative descriptions of human inadequacy, many of which became popular catchphrases among the spectator galleries. It evolved into a spectacle that drew audiences from across the sector. The unstoppable Scirati warlord versus the fragile human female, a mismatch so profound it approached performance art. Betting pools formed among the staff and spectators. The consensus favored Nightbringer's psychological collapse within the month, followed by her literal consumption by an increasingly frustrated instructor. They miscalculated dramatically, but not in ways anyone had the imagination to predict. The breaking point arrived during weapons integration assessment, an exercise designed to test candidates' ability to adapt their natural combat abilities to arena-standard weaponry. The challenge was theoretically straightforward. Demonstrate competence with the arena's regulation plasma gladius, a weapon designed for beings with industrial-grade appendages and reaction speeds that could track hypersonic projectiles while calculating trajectory modifications in real time. Jade's initial attempts were, by conventional metrics, unimpressive. Her form was adequate, her speed unremarkable, and her technique completely wrong for someone lacking natural shock absorption systems or redundant nervous pathways. Pathetic, Thane announced, his voice carrying across the training deck with devastating clarity that caused structural resonance in the observation windows. Your species developed tool use because you lack the anatomical equipment for legitimate combat, and you can't even manage that competently. He approached Jade's training position with predatory grace that made seasoned warriors check their escape routes, forearms moving in synchronized intimidation patterns that had been refined over decades of professional psychological warfare. Tell me, Nightbringer, when your homeworld predators came hunting, did humans fight or flee? Both, sir, Jade replied, methodically checking her weapon's power coupling with the systematic thoroughness of someone who understood that equipment failure could result in immediate death by embarrassment. Both. Thane's laugh was all razor edges and malicious anticipation, the sound of someone who had found fresh material for creative mockery. Allow me to speculate. You cooperated and adapted your way to survival. Clever little mammals with their clever little tools, too anatomically deficient to face genuine challenges through direct confrontation. The other candidates watched with fascination that bordered on morbid curiosity. This had evolved beyond training into public spectacle, the methodical destruction of an overmatched opponent who apparently lacked the basic survival instincts to recognize her situation. Your entire species represents a cosmic accident, Thane continued, warming to his theme like a plasma torch finding optimal fuel mixture. Inadequate anatomy, brittle skeletal structure, reflexes that wouldn't qualify as functional by most galactic standards. You achieved sentience through pure statistical probability, random chance preventing your extinction before you crawled from whatever holes you called shelter. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than his previous roaring. You know what I think, little meat sack? I think your species survived because you taste bad. Even the predators of your pathetic world found you too unappetizing to bother eating. The arena had gone completely silent. Even the environmental systems seemed to be holding their breath. Jade completed her weapon maintenance and looked up at him. For the first time since arriving at the arena, her expression showed something beyond analytical calm. It showed the kind of calculation that made intelligent beings reconsider their life choices. Sir, she said quietly, with respect, your assessment contains significant factual errors. Thane's expression shifted from cruel amusement to genuine interest. Finally, a reaction that promised entertainment value. Enlighten me, human. Describe your species' glorious warrior heritage. Jade set down her plasma gladius and faced him directly, her movements precise as targeting solutions achieving lock. We didn't survive by hiding, so. We survived by systematically eliminating everything that represented a threat to our expansion. Every predator, every competitor, every environmental challenge that stood between us and planetary dominance. The training deck had gone so quiet that atmospheric recycling systems sounded like industrial machinery. When we encountered the apex predators of our world, Jade continued, her voice maintaining the same conversational tone sheet. used to discuss weather patterns. We studied their hunting methodologies, analyzed their behavioral patterns, and systematically drove them to extinction. We turned the most dangerous carnivores into domestic companions. We looked at creatures that had ruled their ecosystems for millions of years and decided they'd make attractive decoration for our living spaces. She took a step closer to the towering alien warlord. When we exhausted external threats, we began eliminating each other. For territory, for resources, for ideological differences, so abstract that most species lack the cognitive framework to comprehend them. We've conducted wars over religious interpretation variations that required scholarly analysis to detect. We've committed genocide over genetic markers that require laboratory equipment to identify. Thane's amusement was evaporating into something approaching concern, which was an emotion he hadn't experienced in approximately 30 years. You want to understand human endurance. Jade's voice remained clinical, conversational. We've maintained continuous warfare for our entire recorded history spanning over 10,000 years. Conflict isn't an aberration for us, it's our default operational state. You want to comprehend adaptation? We've colonized every environment on our planet, from polar regions that would flash freeze most species solid to desert wastelands hot enough to sterilize standard equipment. The warlord opened his mouth to respond, but Jade wasn't finished delivering her educational presentation. You believe we're weak because we lack natural weapons. We built artificial ones that could crack tectonic plates because our biological capabilities weren't sufficient for our ambitions. You think we're fragile? We're the only known species that pursues potentially lethal activities for recreational entertainment purposes. She gestured to the assembled alien candidates, beings whose evolution had optimized them for survival through violence. Every human child learns to survive in environments designed to kill them, because we consider that fundamental education. We consume substances that are literally toxic to other species because we enjoy the neurological effects. We strap ourselves to controlled explosive devices and call it transportation. Our concept of entertainment includes deliberate exposure to mortal danger for fun. The silence stretched like a targeting laser achieving perfect focus. Thane's expression had shifted from mockery to something approaching alarm, which was also an emotion he'd thought he'd outgrown. You were shaped by evolution to be perfect predators, Jade said, her voice never rising above conversational levels. We shaped evolution to meet our specifications. We examined natural selection and decided it wasn't progressing efficiently, so we took direct control of the process. We've been at war with our own biology for 50,000 years. She picked up her plasma gladius again. And we're winning that war. Thane's combat-trained instincts were finally processing what his conscious mind had been too arrogant to recognize. This wasn't submission or psychological breakdown. This was an apex predator explaining why it had been tolerating the situation out of politeness. You think these exercises are challenging for me because I'm human. Jade continued, activating the weapon with movements so fluid they seemed choreographed. So, with respect, my species invented warfare as both applied science and performance art. Everything you're teaching here represents concepts we developed, refined, and discarded for more efficient methodologies thousands of years ago. She moved into a combat stance that somehow incorporated elements from a dozen different fighting disciplines while looking entirely natural. Human combat effectiveness isn't based on natural weapons or armor, so. It's founded on pattern recognition, tactical analysis, and the systematic application of violence as a problem-solving methodology. We don't fight opponents, we eliminate obstacles. What happened next would be discussed in arena circles for decades, primarily because nobody could quite agree on what they'd actually witnessed. Jade moved. It wasn't the superhuman speed that alien species prized. It was something more disturbing. She seemed to anticipate Thane's attacks before he made them, flowing around his strikes like water around stone, turning his own momentum against him with techniques that looked almost gentle until you realized they were systematically dismantling an opponent who outweighed her by several hundred pounds and possessed natural weapons that could punch through starship hulls. The warlord's first swing, a blow that should have liquefied her torso, met empty air. His second strike found her inside his guard, her elbow connecting with nerve clusters he'd forgotten he had. His third attack never happened because she'd somehow wrapped his own arm around his throat in a configuration that basic anatomy suggested should be impossible. The arena spectators watched in stunned silence as humanity's representative systematically demonstrated why his species had conquered the homeworld without benefit of natural weapons, armor, or any of the advantages that other species took for granted. She wasn't stronger than Thane. She wasn't faster. She wasn't equipped with better weapons. She was just better at violence than someone who had spent his entire life believing he was the ultimate expression of evolutionary combat optimization. When it ended, and it ended quickly, though not in the way anyone had predicted, Warlord Thane Grimjaw found himself on the arena floor, conscious but effectively immobilized by joint locks that his species' anatomy wasn't designed to counter, staring up at a small human female who looked like she'd just completed a mildly interesting technical exercise. "Sir," Jade said politely, "would you like me to explain the techniques I just used, or would you prefer to continue with the scheduled training program?" For the first time in his military career, Thane found himself wondering if he had encountered something considerably more dangerous than anything his evolutionary experience had prepared him to understand. And Colonel Jade Nightbringer, humanity's first representative to the Titans arena, smiled with the quiet satisfaction of a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history proving that the most dangerous predators were the ones nobody saw coming. The betting pools were permanently suspended due to a complete inability to calculate odds for scenarios that violated several fundamental assumptions about combat effectiveness and biological limitations. Which was, the arena's management would later reflect, probably the most educational outcome anyone could have reasonably expected.